IPOB, Marginalization, and the Nigerian State. A historical and contemporary overview of conflict, crackdown, and calls for self-determination. The Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, is a freedom movement advocating for the independence of Biafra, a region in southeastern Nigeria primarily inhabited by the Igbo ethnic group. Its formation, ideology, and activities are deeply rooted in historical grievances, ethnic tensions, and the legacy of the Nigerian Civil War, 1967-1970. Historical context: the roots of IPOB. The Nigerian Civil War, 1967-1970, Biafran Agitation. The origins of IPOB trace back to the Nigerian Civil War, when the southeastern region, led by Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, declared the Republic of Biafra in May 1967. This followed ethnic tensions, particularly after the 1966 anti-Igbo pogroms in northern Nigeria, where thousands of Igbos were killed, prompting calls for Biafra sovereignty declaration. War and defeat. The war, driven by ethnic, economic, and political disputes, including control over oil-rich southeastern territories, ended in January 1970 with Biafra's surrender. The conflict caused an estimated 1 to 3 million deaths, mostly from starvation due to Nigeria's blockade, and left deep scars among the Igbo, who felt marginalized in post-war Nigeria. Post-war marginalization. The Nigerian government's "no victor, no vanquished" policy promised reconciliation, but Igbos faced systemic exclusion, including limited political representation, economic neglect, and discriminatory policies like the £20 compensation irrespective of your millions in the bank. These grievances fueled resentment, setting the stage for continued demand for Biafra sovereignty. Pre-IPOB movements. Ohanaeze Ndigbo, 1976. Formed as a socio-cultural organization to represent Igbo interests, Ohanaeze advocated for integration within Nigeria, but failed to address radical demands for Biafra agitation, creating space for groups like IPOB. Movement for the Actualization of the Sovereign State of Biafra, MASOB, 1999. Founded by Ralph Uwazuruwiki, MASOB revived Biafran agitation through nonviolent advocacy. However, its arrests and internal splits by the early 2000s weakened its influence, paving the way for IPOB's emergence. MASOB's moderate approach contrasted with IPOB's more vocal stance. Formation and early years of IPOB. Founding, 2012. IPOB was founded in 2012 by Nnamdi Kanu, a British Nigerian activist, in response to the perceived failures of MASOB and ongoing Igbo marginalization. Kanu, born in 1967 in Abia State, leveraged his platform as director of Radio Biafra, a London-based station, to advocate for Biafran independence. Early activities, 2012-2015, Radio Biafra. Kanu used Radio Biafra to spread IPOB's message, accusing Nigeria of marginalizing Igbos and calling for self-determination. His broadcasts gained traction among Igbo youths and the diaspora, raising IPOB's profile above every other freedom-agitating movement in Africa. Protests and rallies. From 2013, IPOB organized protests in cities like Onitsha, Aba, Owerri, Port Harcourt, Abakaliki, and Enugu, demanding a referendum. These events drew thousands but faced police crackdowns, with Amnesty International later documenting 150 deaths in 2015-2016 IPOB peaceful protests. Government response. The Nigerian government being threatened. IPOB's growing influence arrested Nnamdi Kanu on October 19, 2015, in Lagos by the DSS on charges of sedition and treasonable felony, marked the start of escalated tensions. Strongholds of IPOB. IPOB's strongholds are concentrated in Nigeria's southeast, where the Igbo ethnic group, the movement's primary base, predominates. These areas are characterized by significant grassroots support, frequent protests, sit-at-home orders, and activities of the Eastern Security Network, ESN. The Eastern Security Network, ESN, a security vigilante group of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, confronts Fulani herdsmen primarily to protect Igbo farmlands and communities in Nigeria's southeast from threats. It is widely reported that Fulani herdsmen, often armed and involved in violent clashes with farmers, engage in activities like crop destruction, kidnapping, and land grabbing, which disrupt agricultural activities and threaten local security. Reports indicate ESN's actions are framed as a defense against these Fulani herdsmen incursions, especially during farming seasons, with orders to drive herdsmen out of Biafra land to safeguard Igbo farmers. Aba State. Significance. Aba, a commercial center like every other state, is a key IPOB stronghold due to its economic importance and dense Igbo population. Protests and sit-at-home orders are highly effective there, often paralyzing every activity. Key events. The Nigerian military invasion of Nnamdi Kanu's home in Afarakwu, Umuahia, Abia State, occurred in September 2017 during Operation Python Dance 2. Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, was targeted due to his agitation advocating for Biafran independence. 28 unarmed people were reportedly killed by Nigerian soldiers. Enugu State. Significance. Enugu, the historical capital of the eastern region, hosts significant IPOB activity, though less intense than Anambra or Imo. Protests in 2015, 2016, and sit-at-home compliance demonstrate strong support. Legal milestone: the 2023 Enugu High Court ruling, nullifying IPOB's proscription as a terrorist group, underscored the state's symbolic importance, though the ruling was later overturned. Ebonyi State. Significance. Ebonyi has a quieter but consistent IPOB presence, with protests and sit-at-home adherence. The state's relative underdevelopment fuels IPOB's narrative of marginalization. Academic perspective. A 2020 study by Ebonyi State University scholars noted IPOB's growing influence here, driven by federal neglect. IPOB presence in other states. Beyond the Southeast, IPOB has varying degrees of presence in states associated with the former Biafran territory or areas with Igbo populations. These regions show sympathy for IPOB's cause, though operational activities are less intense. South-South states. River State. Parts of rivers, particularly Igweocha, Port Harcourt, have Igbo communities sympathetic to IPOB. IPOB's presence extends to coastal areas, but activities are limited to sensitization campaigns and occasional protests. Delta State. Igbo-speaking areas like Asaba and Aniocha show support, with IPOB claiming influence in the 2020 UN submission. Cross River and Akwa Ibom states. These states, part of the former Biafra, have minority ethnic groups, Efik, Ibibio, with historical Biafran ties. IPOB's presence is minimal, focusing on advocacy rather than militancy. Bayelsa and Edo states. IPOB claims a presence in these states, particularly among Ijaw and Igbo communities, but activities are sporadic and lack the intensity of Southeast operations. Middle Belt states, Benue and Kogi. States, IPOB has limited presence here, driven by shared grievances against Fulani herdsman attacks, sympathy among Christian communities, but no significant operational bases exist. Context. The Council on Foreign Relations, 2021, noted that conflicts over land and water, once confined to the Middle Belt, are spreading south, amplifying IPOB's appeal among marginalized groups. IPOB mission statement and core values. The Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, an agitating movement advocating for the independence of Biafra in southeastern Nigeria, has articulated its mission and core values through various public statements, official documents, and its leadership's pronouncements, particularly by founder Nnamdi Kanu. While IPOB does not maintain a singular, publicly archived mission statement in the style of corporate entities, its objectives and principles are consistently reflected in its communications, such as Radio Biafra broadcasts, press releases, and submissions to international bodies like the United Nations. Below is a synthesized account of IPOB's mission statement and core values. Mission statement. IPOB's mission is to achieve the restoration of the sovereign state of Biafra through peaceful, non-violent means, primarily via a United Nations supervised referendum to secure self-determination for the Igbo people and other ethnic groups in the former Biafran territory. The movement seeks to address historical and ongoing marginalization, ethnic discrimination, and political exclusion within Nigeria, advocating for the creation of an independent nation where Biafrans can exercise full control over their political, economic, and cultural destiny. Key elements of the mission: self-determination. Secure the right of Biafrans to decide their political future through a democratic referendum, as guaranteed by the UN Charter and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Peaceful advocacy. Pursue independence through non-violent strategies, including protests, legal challenges, international lobbying, and public awareness campaigns. Restoration of Biafra. Re-establish the Republic of Biafra, which existed from 1967 to 1970, encompassing the southeast and parts of the south-south regions of Nigeria. Protection of rights. Safeguard the human rights, dignity, and security of Biafrans, addressing grievances like ethnic violence, economic neglect, and political alienation. Global engagement. Mobilize the Biafran diaspora and international community to support the cause, as seen in the 2020 UN submission documenting abuses. This mission is articulated in IPOB's public rhetoric, such as KANU's Radio Biafra broadcasts and the group's 2020 letter to the UN Special Rapporteur, which emphasized the inalienable right to self-determination and condemned Nigeria's systematic persecution of Biafrans. Core values. IPOB's core values reflect its ideological foundation, rooted in Igbo cultural principles, the legacy of the Nigerian Civil War, and a commitment to justice and self-governance. These values guide its operations, member conduct, and public image, as outlined in official statements and inferred from its activities. Self-determination and freedom. Value. The belief that Biafrans have an inherent right to self-governance and freedom from oppression, as enshrined in international law. Application. IPOB prioritizes a referendum as the democratic path to independence, rejecting forced integration into Nigeria. This is evident in its global campaigns, such as protests in the US and UK, and legal challenges like the 2023 Enugu High Court case nullifying its prescription. Example: the 2020 UN submission cited Article 20 of the African Charter, asserting Biafran's right to exist as a distinct people, free from domination. Nonviolence and peace. Value: a commitment to achieving its goals through peaceful means, condemning bloodshed and prioritizing human life. Application: IPOB's early activities, 2012-2017, focused on protests, sit-at-home orders, and media advocacy via Radio Biafra. Despite the formation of the Eastern Security Network, ESN, in 2020, IPOB's leadership insists ESN's role is defensive, protecting communities from external threats like Fulani herdsmen, not offensive warfare. Example: KANU's 2015-2017 statements emphasized no guns, no violence. Justice and accountability. Value: a demand for justice against historical and ongoing wrongs, including the 1966 anti-Igbo pogroms, the Nigerian Civil War's atrocities, and post-war marginalization. Application: IPOB seeks accountability through legal avenues, such as the ECOWAS Court's 2020 ruling awarding KANU N25 million for unlawful detention and international advocacy documenting abuses, as in the 2020 UN letter listing 12 incidents of state violence. Example: the 2023 Enugu High Court ruling, which declared IPOB's proscription unconstitutional, aligns with this value, though its reversal by the Abuja Court of Appeal limited its impact. Unity and solidarity. Value: fostering unity among Biafrans, including Igbos and other ethnic groups like Ijaw and Efik, to build a cohesive movement. Application: IPOB organizes across the Southeast and parts of the South-South, using cultural symbols like the Biafran flag and Remembrance Day, May 30, to rally support. The diaspora's role, with coordinators in the US, UK, and Europe, reinforces global solidarity. Example: the 2015-2016 protests in Onitsha and Aba, drawing thousands, showcased regional unity. Rule of law and human rights. Value: upholding the rule of law and advocating for human rights, including freedom of expression, association, and protection from state violence. Application: IPOB has pursued legal challenges, such as the 2020 ECOWAS case and 2023 Enugu ruling, and submitted evidence of abuses to the UN, citing violations of the UN Charter and African Charter. It also provides legal support to detained members. Example: the Supreme Court's 2023 acknowledgement of KANU's unlawful rendition from Kenya reflects IPOB's push for legal recourse, though the trial's continuation limited its success. Cultural preservation and identity. Value: preserving Igbo and Biafran cultural heritage, language, and history as a foundation for nationhood. Application: IPOB promotes Igbo traditions through events like Biafra Remembrance Day and media content celebrating pre-colonial Biafran governance. It frames Biafra as a restoration of a historically autonomous identity disrupted by British colonialism and Nigerian amalgamation. Example: KANU's Radio Biafra broadcasts often invoke Igbo proverbs and historical narratives, reinforcing cultural pride among supporters. Resilience and sacrifice. Value: a commitment to persevere despite persecution, inspired by the sacrifices of the Nigerian Civil War and ongoing struggles. Application: IPOB members, including those in exile, e.g., in the US, UK, or Russia, and supporters enduring arrests or sit-at-home disruptions, embody this value. KANU's continued leadership despite detentions, 2015-2021 present, symbolizes resilience. Example: the 2020 formation of ESN, despite IPOB's proscription, reflects a willingness to confront state forces to protect Biafran communities, though it risks escalating violence. IPOB leadership structure. IPOB's organizational structure includes a centralized leadership with regional coordinators and grassroots supporters. Key figures and roles include Supreme Leader Nnamdi Kanu, the founder and primary figurehead, leads IPOB's global and local operations. Despite his arrests in 2015 and 2021, he remains the symbolic and strategic head. Directorate of State, DOS, a leadership council based outside Nigeria, often in Europe or the US, oversees policy, strategy, and international advocacy. Spokespersons and media. Emma Powerful, IPOB's Media and Publicity Secretary, is a prominent voice issuing statements and coordinating propaganda. Regional and state coordinators. IPOB has coordinators in each Southeast state and some South-South areas, responsible for organizing protests, sit-at-home orders, and local recruitment. These roles are fluid and often undisclosed to avoid government crackdowns. Eastern Security Network, ESN. Established in 2020, tasked with protecting Igbo communities from alleged attacks by Fulani herdsmen and security forces. ESN operatives are not formally ranked in public records, but operate in cells across the Southeast, particularly in rural areas like Orlu, Imo, and Aba, Abia. Grassroots members. The bulk of IPOB's rank and file consists of supporters, including youths, traders, and diaspora Igbo, who participate in protests, fundraise, or spread propaganda via Radio Biafra. Key developments and escalation, 2015 to 2020. Kanu's arrest and detention, 2015 to 2017. Kanu's 2015 arrest sparked widespread protests across the southeast, with IPOB supporters demanding his release. The Nigerian government accused him of inciting violence via Radio Biafra. Amnesty International's 2016 report detailed the killing of over 150 peaceful protesters, notably in Nkepor, Anambra, on May 29–30, 2016, during a Biafra Remembrance Day event. In April 2017, the Federal High Court in Abuja granted Kanu bail on health grounds, but stringent conditions limited his activism. The September 2017 military raid on his Umuahia home during Operation Python Dance 2 forced Kanu to flee Nigeria, intensifying IPOB's defiance. Proscription as a terrorist organization, 2017. On September 15, 2017, the Southeast Governors Forum, led by David Umahi, proscribed IPOB's activities, citing threats to regional stability. Days later, on September 18, 2017, the Federal High Court in Abuja declared IPOB a terrorist organization under the Terrorism Prevention Act, following a request from the Attorney General. This provided legal backing for intensified military crackdowns, including raids and arrests. IPOB rejected the label, arguing it was a nonviolent movement. The proscription drove many members underground or into exile, mirroring the Nadiko experience in the 1990s. Formation of the Eastern Security Network, 2020. In December 2020, IPOB established the ESN to protect Igbo communities from Fulani herdsmen attacks and security force abuses. The unlawful abduction and rendition of Nnamdi Kanu. The unlawful abduction and rendition of Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, from Kenya to Nigeria in June 2021 is a significant and controversial event that raised concerns about human rights violations, international law, and Nigeria's approach to separatist movements. Background: Nnamdi Kanu, a British Nigerian activist and IPOB leader, was first arrested in Nigeria in October 2015 on charges of treasonable felony and sedition for advocating Biafran independence. Granted bail in April 2017, he fled Nigeria after a military raid on his home in Umuahia during Operation Python Dance 2 in September 2017, which IPOB claimed was an assassination attempt. Kanu's whereabouts were unknown until his rearrest in 2021, sparking speculation about how and where he was apprehended. Circumstances of the rendition. Date and location: Kanu was abducted on June 19, 2021, in Kenya and forcibly returned to Nigeria by June 27, 2021. His brother, Kingsley Kanu, and IPOB's legal team claimed he was kidnapped in Nairobi, tortured for 8 days, and then renditioned to Nigeria without formal extradition proceedings. Details of the operation. Arrest. According to Kingsley Kanu, Nnamdi was abducted in Kenya by agents acting on behalf of the Nigerian government. Reports suggest he was lured to a meeting in Nairobi, where he was detained by Kenyan authorities or operatives collaborating with Nigeria. Torture allegations: IPOB and Kanu's legal team, led by barrister Aloy Ejimakor, alleged that Kanu was held in a non-official secret facility in Kenya, subjected to torture, and denied access to legal representation during his 8-day detention. Transfer to Nigeria. On June 27, 2021, Kanu was forcibly transported to Nigeria and handed over to the Department of State Services, DSS, in Abuja. Nigeria's Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, described the operation as a classic intelligence effort involving Nigerian security agencies and international partners, but he did not confirm Kenya's role. Legal and human rights implications. violation of international law, African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Kanu's legal team argued that his rendition violated Article 12, Taksha 4, which prohibits expulsion from a state without a legal decision. The absence of formal extradition proceedings, as required by Kenyan law and international treaties, rendered the transfer unlawful. Nigerian Constitution. Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution guarantees rights to a fair hearing and freedom from arbitrary detention, both of which were breached by Kanu's abduction and secret detention, according to his counsel. Extradition protocols. Nigeria and Kenya are signatories to treaties requiring judicial oversight for extraditions. Kanu's forcible transfer without court approval in Kenya was labeled extraordinary rendition, a serious breach of international law. Judicial acknowledgement. Court of Appeal ruling, October 13, 2022. The Court of Appeal in Abuja declared Kanu's rendition from Kenya unlawful, quashing the terrorism charges against him due to the violation of his fundamental rights. The court ordered his release, stating that the Nigerian government's actions undermined the legal process. Supreme Court ruling, December 15, 2023. Nigeria's Supreme Court acknowledged that Kanu's rendition was unlawful, confirming violations of his rights under the African Charter and Nigeria's Extradition Act. Justice E.A. Agim specifically noted that Kanu was kidnapped, abducted, and extraordinarily renditioned without legal proceedings. However, the court upheld the continuation of his trial, arguing that the unlawful rendition did not nullify the charges. Federal High Court, Umuahia, ongoing 2022. Kanu's counsel filed a suit in March 2022 at the Federal High Court in Umuahia, seeking to redress the rendition's violations, including torture, unlawful detention, and denial of a fair hearing. The case, heard on October 4, 2022, aimed to halt Kanu's prosecution and restore his pre-rendition status, but no final ruling is documented as of June 2025. The Nigeria State Human Rights Violations. Nigeria's military and security agencies have faced significant accusations of human rights violations, particularly against the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, from international organizations like the United Nations, Amnesty International, and others. These indictments focus on extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, torture, and excessive use of force, primarily in the southeast region, where IPOB operates. Below is a detailed account of past and recent allegations, supported by available evidence from international bodies and reports, with a focus on IPOB-related violations and broader patterns of abuse by Nigerian security forces. Indictments by international organizations. 2019 UN Special Rapporteur Report on Extrajudicial Killings. In September 2019, Agnes Callamard, the UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Summary or Arbitrary Executions, conducted a country visit to Nigeria and highlighted violations against IPOB. Her report noted arbitrary killings of IPOB members by Nigerian security forces, describing a pattern of excessive lethal force and lack of accountability. The report criticized Nigeria's legal framework, including the Constitution and Police Order 237, for allowing broad use of lethal force without adhering to principles of necessity and proportionality. It also referenced the government's 2016 acknowledgement of accusations of extrajudicial killings, torture, and arbitrary arrests against IPOB, the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, IMN, and others, with no significant investigations or prosecutions. Callamard's findings emphasized the militarization of policing, lack of transparency, and failure to investigate allegations, fueling distrust in security agencies. The report specifically flagged the repression of IPOB as part of a broader trend of state violence against separatist groups. 2020 IPOB submission to the UN. On March 25, 2020, IPOB submitted a letter to Agnes Callamard, documenting 12 incidents of human rights abuses against Biafrans by Nigerian military, police, and security forces. The letter, signed by IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu, U.S. National Coordinator Dr. Clement Okoro, and 22 U.S. state coordinators, highlighted incidents from indiscriminate arrests to mass executions. A notable case was the alleged killing of up to 150 IPOB supporters by the Nigerian military in May 2016 during a protest in Nkpor, Anambra State. The letter accused the Nigerian government, under President Muhammadu Buhari, of ignoring or sanctioning these abuses, with no mechanism to hold perpetrators accountable. The UN has not issued a formal indictment based on this submission, but the documentation was acknowledged as part of ongoing concerns about Nigeria's human rights record. UN Human Rights Committee, 2019. The UN Human Rights Committee's 2019 concluding observations on Nigeria criticized the country's legal provisions allowing excessive force, referencing earlier 2006 findings by the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings. While not exclusively focused on IPOB, the report noted the lack of effective investigations into allegations of state violence, including against separatist groups like IPOB, as a systemic issue. Amnesty International, 2016, Report on IPOB Killings. Amnesty International's November 24, 2016, report titled, Nigeria, Bullets Were Raining Everywhere. Deadly Repression of Pro-Biafra Activists, documented the extrajudicial execution of at least 150 peaceful IPOB protesters between August 2015 and May 2016. The report focused on a specific incident on May 29-30, 2016, during a march in Nkpor, Anambra State, where security forces allegedly killed numerous IPOB supporters. Amnesty claimed the Nigerian army acted in self-defense, reporting only 5 deaths, but evidence, including eyewitness accounts and satellite imagery, supported a higher death toll. The report called for investigations, but as of 2018, Amnesty noted no justice had been served for the victims. The report accused the Nigerian military of deliberate, excessive force and a lack of accountability, with no investigations into the killings despite international pressure. U.S. State Department, 2024-2025. The U.S. State Department's 2024 Human Rights Report on Nigeria noted the continued detention of Nnamdi Kanu on charges of treason, terrorism, and illegal possession of firearms, which DSS witness after cross-examination by Kanu's legal team failed to provide evidence of these charges in the recent court proceedings at the Federal High Court in Abuja, 2025 trial. It highlighted violations during his 2021 arrest and unlawful rendition, with Nigeria's Supreme Court acknowledging that the DSS violated Kanu's rights. Past and recent patterns of violations, extrajudicial killings, the May 2016 Nkpor massacre, where up to 150 IPOB protesters were allegedly killed, remains a focal point of international criticism. Amnesty's 2016 report and IPOB's 2020 UN submission cite this as a deliberate act of repression, with no subsequent investigations. Excessive force. Operations like Python Dance 2, 2017, involved heavy military presence, gunfire, and property destruction, as seen in the raid on Kanu's Umuahia home. The UN Special Rapporteur criticized the militarization of policing, with IPOB as a key target. Torture and incommunicado. Detention. Reports indicate IPOB members face torture and lack of access to lawyers, as alleged in the 2025 Wawa trial concerns. While not formally indicted by the UN, these claims echo Amnesty's findings of systemic abuse. Lack of accountability. Both the UN and Amnesty have repeatedly noted Nigeria's failure to investigate or prosecute security personnel. The 2017 Presidential Investigation Panel, PIP, was established to review military compliance with human rights, but no significant outcomes regarding IPOB have been reported. Key judgments in favor of IPOB or Nnamdi Kanu. ECOWAS Court Ruling, July 7, 2020. Case: Nnamdi Kanu v. Federal Republic of Nigeria Court, Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Community Court of Justice, Abuja. Details: Kanu filed a suit against the Nigerian government alleging human rights violations during his 2015 arrest and detention by the Department of State Services, DSS. He claimed unlawful detention, torture, and infringement of his rights to free expression and movement, citing violations of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The ECOWAS court ruled that Kanu's arrest and detention in 2015 were unlawful and arbitrary. The court found that the Nigerian government violated Kanu's rights under Articles 6 and 12 of the African Charter, which protect against arbitrary detention and ensure freedom of movement. The court awarded Kanu N25 million in damages for the violation of his rights and ordered the Nigerian government to ensure such abuses did not recur. Implications: the ruling was a significant victory, affirming international oversight of Nigeria's human rights record and validating Kanu's claims of state persecution. It emboldened IPOB's narrative of systemic Igbo marginalization. However, Nigeria's non-compliance with the ruling, as the government did not pay the damages or alter its stance on Kanu, limited its practical impact. Kanu's 2017 bail and subsequent flight after the Umuahia raid overshadowed the judgment's enforcement. Limitations: the ECOWAS court lacks enforcement powers, and Nigeria's sovereignty allowed it to ignore the ruling. The judgment did not address IPOB's proscription or broader activities, focusing solely on Kanu's personal treatment. Enugu High Court Ruling, March 23, 2023. Case: Indigenous People of Biafra v. Federal Republic of Nigeria. Court, Enugu, State. High Court, Enugu. Details: IPOB challenged the 2017 proscription of the group as a terrorist organization, arguing it was unconstitutional and violated their rights to free association and expression under Nigeria's 1999 Constitution and international law. Justice Anthony Onovo ruled that the proscription was illegal and unconstitutional, as the Nigerian government failed to follow due process. The court noted that IPOB was not given a fair hearing before the Federal High Court in Abuja issued the 2017 proscription order contravening principles of natural justice. The court declared the proscription null and void, ordering the government to lift the terrorist designation and pay N8 billion in damages to IPOB for violating their rights. Implications: this was a landmark victory for IPOB, challenging the legal basis of the government's crackdowns. It briefly raised hopes of de-escalation, as the ruling suggested IPOB could operate legally and seek dialogue. The judgment embarrassed the federal government and Southeast governors, who had endorsed the proscription in 2017, exposing procedural flaws in their approach. Limitations: the ruling was overturned by the Abuja Court of Appeal in 2023, which upheld the federal government's proscription, citing national security concerns and IPOB's alleged violent activities through the Eastern Security Network, ESN. The appeal court's decision nullified the Enugu ruling's practical effects. The N8 billion damages were not paid, and the government continued its operations against IPOB, including raids in Imo, 2024, and Anambra, 2025. The ruling's impact was thus symbolic rather than transformative. Federal High Court bail grant for Nnamdi Kanu, April 25, 2017. Case: Federal Republic of Nigeria versus Nnamdi Kanu Court, Federal High Court, Abuja. Details: following Kanu's arrest in October 2015 on charges of treasonable felony, sedition, and ethnic incitement, he was detained by the DSS for nearly 2 years. His legal team argued that his detention without trial violated his right to a fair hearing under Section 36 of Nigeria's 1999 Constitution. Justice Binta Nyako granted Kanu bail on health grounds, citing his deteriorating condition in detention. The bail was set at N$100 million with stringent conditions, including 3 sureties: 1, a serving senator, a ban on public rallies, and surrender of his passport. Implications: the bail was a partial victory, allowing Kanu temporary freedom and highlighting judicial acknowledgement of his unlawful prolonged detention. It galvanized IPOB's supporters, who saw it as a step toward challenging state repression. The ruling pressured the government to adhere to legal standards, as Kanu's detention had drawn criticism from Amnesty International and local activists. Limitations: the bail conditions were restrictive, limiting Kanu's activism. After the September 2017 military raid on his Umuahia home during Operation Python Dance 2, Kanu fled Nigeria, violating bail terms, which led to its revocation. This undermined the ruling's long-term impact. The government's subsequent actions, including Kanu's 2021 rearrest, showed limited respect for the court's leniency. Supreme Court Acknowledgement of Rights Violation, December 15, 2023. Case: Federal Republic of Nigeria vs. Nnamdi Kanu Court, Supreme Court of Nigeria. Details: Kanu's legal team challenged his 2021 rearrest and extradition from Kenya, alleging violations of his rights to a fair trial and freedom from unlawful rendition. They argued that the DSS's actions, including intercepting him abroad, breached international law and Nigeria's Extradition Act. The Supreme Court, in a split decision, acknowledged that Kanu's rendition was unlawful, as it bypassed legal extradition processes. The court noted violations of his rights under international treaties Nigeria is party to, such as the African Charter. However, the court upheld the continuation of Kanu's trial on terrorism charges, ruling that the unlawful rendition did not nullify the charges, as the government had sufficient evidence to proceed. Implications: the acknowledgement of unlawful rendition was a significant moral victory for Kanu and IPOB, reinforcing claims of state persecution. It aligned with the U.S. State Department's 2024 report, which noted rights abuses during Kanu's arrest. The ruling pressured the government to address procedural irregularities, drawing international attention to Kanu's case and IPOB's broader struggle. Limitations: the decision did not lead to Kanu's release or dismissal of charges, as the court prioritized national security over rights violations. Kanu remained detained, with trials ongoing as of June 2025, limiting the ruling's practical effect. The government's non-compliance with calls for Kanu's release, as urged by some Southeast leaders post-ruling, diminished its impact. Conclusion: since the end of the Nigerian Civil War, the Igbo people have faced systemic marginalization, political exclusion, and alleged human rights abuses, issues that fueled the rise of IPOB and its calls for Biafran self-determination. Despite the group's emphasis on nonviolence and legal advocacy, the Nigerian government's military responses have been widely criticized for excessive force and rights violations. The contrast between the treatment of IPOB members and the reintegration of repentant Boko Haram insurgents has further deepened perceptions of injustice and ethnic bias. As tensions persist, a peaceful resolution rooted in dialogue, justice, and respect for human rights remains crucial to preventing further unrest and fostering national unity. Article written by Okwudiri Innocent Nduru and produced by Family Writers Press International.